On the night of August 24, 2001, Air Transat Flight 236 was en route from Toronto to Lisbon. Flying at an altitude of 39,000 feet, the aircraft reached the middle of the Atlantic Ocean when suddenly, both engines shut down because the plane had run out of fuel and began to descend rapidly. There was water all around, and the nearest airport was 120 kilometers away, making it nearly impossible to reach. It seemed there was only one possible outcome of this accident: death. On the evening of August 23, 2001, Canadian airline Air Transat Flight 236 was preparing to depart from Toronto Airport to Lisbon, Portugal. Since it was going to be a 7-hour non-stop flight, 48 metric tons of fuel were loaded after routine service and maintenance checks. This was an Airbus A330 aircraft, considered the most advanced and safest aircraft of its time. The 48-year-old captain, Robert Pachet, had 16,800 flight hours of experience, while First Officer Dirk de Jager had flown 4,800 hours. Both had flown the Airbus A330 several times before. Shortly, 293 passengers and 13 crew members boarded the flight, and around 9 p.m., the aircraft took off successfully from Toronto Airport. The pilots gradually steered the plane towards the Atlantic Ocean, heading to Lisbon. Within minutes, the aircraft reached its cruising altitude of 39,000 feet. On long flights like this, pilots don't have much work as most tasks are handled by the autopilot system. The pilots just monitor the situation and periodically update the control tower with their location. 4 hours had passed since the flight took off, and everything was running normally. Most of the passengers were fast asleep. Within minutes, the aircraft reached the middle of the Atlantic Ocean when Captain Robert Pachet noticed something unusual on the control panel of engine number 2. This was the first indication of trouble, and it marked the beginning of a severe test for the flight's pilots. Around 1 a.m., the captain observed that the oil pressure in the right engine had increased significantly, the oil quantity was low, and the oil temperature was also low. Both pilots had never encountered such an error in their careers because, normally, when an engine, whether of a scooter or an airplane, operates for an extended period, its temperature gradually increases. However, in this case, the temperature was rapidly dropping, which was highly unusual. Both pilots immediately checked the flight manual, but found nothing useful. Without delay, the pilots contacted the Air Transat Maintenance Control Center in Canada and informed them of the issue. The response was to keep monitoring the error, and they would contact them as soon as more information was available. Although the cockpit displayed faulty readings, the flight was not experiencing any difficulty. The pilots relaxed, thinking it might be a sensor fault giving incorrect oil readings. But what happened next is still recorded in the history of air accidents in dark letters. About half an hour later, another advisory message appeared on the cockpit screen in front of the captain, but this time it was related to fuel, not oil. In commercial airlines, the fuel is equally distributed in their wings, but the screen showed a warning that the fuel in the right wing was less than in the left wing. This issue did not seem too serious to the pilots, as such warnings can sometimes occur even with a slight difference in fuel levels. The cross-feed valve is then opened to distribute the fuel equally in both wings. The pilots did this, and the fuel quantity in both wings became equal. However, 10 minutes later, the captain saw a low fuel warning again on the display. Upon checking, they found that the fuel in the right wing had decreased again, and there wasn't enough fuel left to reach Lisbon, even combining the remaining fuel in both wings. At that moment, there were only 7 tons of fuel left, which was just 6% of the plane's total capacity, and it was depleting rapidly. Thus, the pilots had no choice but to divert the plane. They decided to land at Lajes Airport on the nearest Terceira island and immediately contacted traffic control there, explaining the situation. However, both pilots were haunted by the question: why was the fuel decreasing? Would they be able to reach Lajes Airport or not? The captain then immediately asked a flight attendant to check the right wing through the window to see if there was any fuel leakage. However, in the pitch-dark night, the flight attendant couldn't see anything. At this point, fuel was depleting at a rate of 1 ton every 5 minutes, leaving only 25 minutes of fuel remaining, which made it unlikely to reach Terceira Island. The maintenance team then advised the captain to bring the plane down to an altitude of 20,000 feet to confirm the fuel leak. But the captain refused, believing that even if a fuel leak was confirmed, they would not be able to regain the altitude of 39,000 feet, which could allow them to glide further. Suddenly, the right engine caught fire, confirming that there was indeed a leak. This explosion caused panic among the passengers inside, shaking the plane. Captain Pache requested the passengers to remain calm. The plane now had 4.5 tons of fuel left and only one engine, which was not enough to keep the large aircraft cruising. As a result, the plane's altitude began to decrease slowly. There was only 600 kilograms of fuel remaining, and the plane was still 240 kilometers away from its destination. Just then, what the captain had feared happened. The left engine, too, shut down after running at full thrust. Now, the flight was gliding over the Atlantic Ocean with no engine power. The plane's power system also failed, plunging the entire cabin into darkness. However, the important cockpit equipment continued operating on emergency support. Lajes Airport was 120 kilometers away, and the aircraft had descended to 30,000 feet. If the plane could not glide to the airport, it would have to land in the water. The crew immediately began preparing the passengers for a possible water landing, which is quite dangerous due to the high impact it can cause to the passengers. Even if they survived the impact, they could still drown in the water. Gliding a heavy commercial plane is challenging, relying entirely on pitch control, which the pilots manually managed with levers. The altitude was decreasing at a rate of 200 feet per minute, meaning the next 15 minutes would determine life or death for the 306 people on board. A few minutes later, the distance between the plane and the airport had reduced to 15 kilometers. At this distance, it is advised to maintain an altitude of 3,000 feet, but the aircraft was at 13,000 feet. If the captain had tilted the flight forward to reduce altitude quickly, there was a 90% chance of a crash landing. Therefore, the pilot made a 360 degrees turn, maintaining the same distance between the plane and the airport, while the altitude dropped from 8,000 feet to 5,000 feet, still 2,000 feet above the recommended level. Another 360 degrees turn was not possible, so the pilot steered the plane toward the airport runway and made some S-turns. This zigzag pattern allowed extra time to reduce the altitude further. During normal landings, flaps and engine thrust are used to keep the plane's nose up, but without engine thrust, the pilot could not open the flaps, as doing so would increase the air drag from the flaps and cause the plane to tilt further forward, resulting in a crash landing. Therefore, the pilot decided to land with the flaps closed, causing a severe impact between the plane and the runway. In 12 minutes, 8 tires burst, and the plane skidded to one side. But the captain skillfully applied brakes gradually, and finally, the plane stopped. However, a massive fire erupted in the plane's landing gear with a big explosion. The emergency crew near the runway immediately extinguished the fire. In this way, the brave pilots of Air Transat Flight 236 saved the lives of 306 passengers. To date, it is the only aircraft in history that holds the record for gliding to its destination for so long without any engine power. The question then arose, where did the error occur? Investigations revealed that before takeoff in Toronto, during maintenance, engineers had changed a part of the engine that was not perfectly fitted. This caused vibrations in the part during the engine's operational condition, which burst the nearby fuel line. The pilots were also found at fault for not paying enough attention to the fuel leak and for keeping the cross-feed valve open for too long, which caused fuel from engine 1 to leak into engine 2, resulting in a complete fuel loss. So, friends, which air accident would you like to learn about in the next case study? Do let us know in the comments. If you liked our efforts in this video, please like and share it, and subscribe to the Fusion Arc channel and press the bell icon to avoid missing any upcoming video notifications.